We understand that preparations are underway to move security cooperation to alternative non-EU mechanisms, including Interpol and the Council of Europe conventions and bilateral channels in the event of our leaving without a deal. And I just wondered if you could give us a more detailed explanation of what those alternative options for security cooperation would be, and the progress you've made in making contingency plans for moving to them. Who would like to start? I should say that I'm conscious that not all of you will want to answer every question, so it's up to you to decide which ones are best for you. Who'd like to go on that one first of all?
I can start,
Please.
Chairman, if that helps.
Please.
So the role of National Crime Agency is to lead the UK's fight to cut serious and organised crime. Our link to the matters we're talking about today are many and varied. We both use the EU tools that we are talking about today, but we also deliver them to wider law enforcement through the UK National Central Bureau and the UK's International Criminality Bureau. Predominantly, the measures that we will be talking about here are the Schengen Information System 2 system, European arrest warrants, and arrangements for overseas surveillance through Article 40, and also our role in leading the UK Bureau in Interpol. There are, of course, members will be very well aware, there are, of course, many EU tools, and I suspect you don't want me to talk through them all individually.
40 plus. I think we can focus on the main ones.
Absolutely. So if I focus firstly on Schengen Information System 2, which is a system that I know you've heard evidence before, is integral to wider law enforcement. It provides live-time information for frontline officers from a range of agencies, and provides information on alerts and whether that be on wanted people, missing people, vehicles of note and the like. You will have heard evidence before that the loss of that is very significant. The NCA, supported by colleagues across agencies represented here, have been working hard to seek to mitigate the loss of SIS2, predominantly through the transference of data into through Interpol notices, which are then made available through the Police National Computer and the Warnings Index. So there is an ongoing piece of work to both take existing Interpol notices and diffusions and transfer them, which is at times a manual process, onto policing systems that will be accessible to all. And we have also made progress in putting in a more automated process so that after we exit the EU, we will be able to take new Interpol notices and put them into the Police National Computer. That work is on track, but it is more laborious, it is more time consuming, it takes more resource, and we need to be clear that it doesn't provide a complete mitigation of the risks. So there will be a large number of alerts on the SIS2 system, which are currently available to law enforcement officers to make good decisions, that will not be available because they are not capable of being backed by Interpol notices. The key element there, or one of the key elements in keeping the public safe, is of course the ability to understand the criminal background and threat posed by people in front of a patrolling officer, crucially whether they are arrestable. And at present, if somebody is liable to arrest through a European arrest warrant, that will feature on the Schengen Information System too. The work we are doing will seek to mitigate the risk of not having that available, because it will allow us to, we will put Interpol notices on the Police National Computer so they will be available to people. That is not a complete mitigation of the risk. We need to be clear about that. So we are reliant firstly on EU member states taking out Interpol notices for people that they wish to circulate as being wanted. We are reliant on EU member states acting upon our own Interpol notices because at the moment it's a very slick automated system, and in the future it wouldn't be. And of course, in relation to even when someone becomes aware that an individual is subject to an Interpol red notice, a wanted notice, unlike the current system, they are unlikely to be eligible for an automatic arrest at that time. There will be a process to go through. And I think you may have heard evidence before that that presents, we believe, a risk to public safety. So a risk of taking up everyone's time. The key issue we see in that area is we are closing the gap. We are working hard. We have recruited a large number of people. We are doing a significant data entry exercise to close the gap in information that will be available to patrolling officers and law enforcement more widely. But it would be wrong to suggest that is a complete fix.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Jesse Martin, did you want to comment on that?
I'll add from a normal policing point of view. So Steve's obviously mentioned a couple of areas. For us, of course, it's more than serious and organised crime. It's about policing across the board. So when Steve talks about SIS2 and people that are put on the system as wanted, we use our missing people to go on that system as well. So, of course, at the moment, again, that's automated. Anything that an officer uploads onto the police national computer automatically translates into SIS2 and goes onto the European system. So at the moment, for our missing people, it's very easy. Everyone that's missing goes on that database. So if they travel abroad, we're notified of it. And last year, there was something like 650 vulnerable missing people returned from Europe to us. Obviously, if we lose that, it's a very different case. We would have to think about each one, whether it goes onto the Interpol database, etc. We've always been very clear that fallbacks are not as efficient or effective as they currently are. Some of the other areas I'm sure colleagues will talk about is ECRIS, which is the European Criminal Record System. Currently, that's semi-automated. We can get replies back in about 6 days. Of course, if that goes, the fallback and the contingency for that is the 1959 Convention of Europe. So again, it slows things down. Some countries don't have to apply to timescales. A lot of the other fallbacks are Convention of Europe fallbacks. So in relation to those, of course, you will then you have the potential for 27 member states to interpret the Council of Europe legislation in a slightly different way. So it's not sort of a one-size-fits-all for a number of those areas. So from our point of view, obviously we are a receiver of these sort of areas and facilitated processes a lot through the NCA. We've obviously, from a policing point of view, just set up the International Crime Coordination Centre. So there's a group of experts that know all about extradition and places like that. We have currently, as part of those contingencies, worked through all of the training requirements that forces will need to make sure that when they fall back on some of these contingencies, they will be in a fit place to be able to do so. So again, I think probably replicates what Steve said. It's about trying to close the gap. We don't close the gap completely, but it's about trying to mitigate all of those risks as far as we're able.
There's a lot of talk about fallbacks there. I mean, are there areas of cooperation which you can now manage through EU mechanisms which have no fallback at all?
Shall I?
Yeah, please.
Shall I take that one? So I wonder if it's helpful if I just say a couple of words on preparedness generally in terms
please.
of how we're managing this process across government. So
that would be very helpful.
So as you've heard from my colleagues, these aren't like-for-like replacements. What they are, in large part, is tried and tested mechanisms that we use with other countries. So this is primarily about moving traffic from one set of systems to another in terms of that getting that pipe work in place. So we've had plans in place to do this for well over a year now, and we've been implementing those plans since summer last year. So it's been quite an intensive implementation programme. We run a contingency planning steering group which covers 17 different organisations in the law enforcement and criminal justice sector. At the moment that is meeting on a weekly rhythm. And that is designed, that is to ensure across all of the different tools that the traffic can be effectively moved from one system to the other. We've also had a specialist team of security IT experts who've been working full-time on the necessary IT changes, and they've been based physically in the same place in what we call a Tiger team since November last year. So there's been an intensive implementation programme in place for some time now. And we have a reasonable level of confidence that we are ready to move the traffic from one system to another, with the caveat that these, as has been mentioned, that these aren't like-for-like replacements. The one area where at the moment there is no what you might call fallback is in relation to passenger name records. So, as you would expect, this is an area where we have signalled to the Commission that it is an area we would wish to discuss with them. Essentially, the EU rules on data protection cause some considerable difficulties for EU carriers transferring data to third countries, which of course the UK would become from the point of no deal. So this is an area where there is little we can unilaterally do to mitigate the loss of that EU measure.